Like I said, I mentioned the Secure Fence Act of 2006. Yeah, Democrats didn't sign this. They were supposed to put up a fence. I don't know what happened to it, but I actually have the act here in my hand. I'm not going to read. I'm going to spare you. I'm not going to read it to you. But the whole idea was they were going to put a fence up to keep people from crossing the border. Now, you have to be able to secure your border. And one of the things they want to talk about, and I think we would agree on this, that we do want to have immigration reform. That something needs to happen different the way people become U.S. citizens. Okay, a special track. But you have, one of the things that they want to do is stop people from running across the border. Because if you try to do the other first, people are going to continue to come. And so they want to stop the inflow of people coming across the border. Then they're supposedly going to look at trying to fix the immigration problem that everybody agrees we have. And then hopefully that it'll then work. But as I said in my speech, I said we need to be looking at all our ports of entry. It's not because people can fly over that fence. I understand that.
Oh, you go under.
But here's what
But I'm not sure how deep they're actually making the fences. So if they make them deep enough, maybe that'll help cut down some of the tunnels. But you know.
Well, here's a challenge I have with the current conservative ideology on crime and illegality. Conservatives want to deal with the problem at the symptom, if you will, and not at the source or the root. Have we ever asked the question why so many people are trying to get in this country? Have you ever just stopped and asked that question? What are they coming for? Well, let's think about it. First of all, America likes cheap and free labor. That's the bottom line. So maybe if you prosecuted the companies that were hiring people illegally and not giving them full minimum wage, maybe, just maybe, the demand for the labor would dry up and people would not come. That's number one. Number two, if you think about the migrant crisis coming across the border from countries like Honduras, Guatemala, if you just take a moment to look back in history, the United States policies during the Cold War created much of the crisis that you see in these countries right now. The Guatemalan refugees who are coming across the border are running from the violence that has existed through a 36-year civil war that was created because the CIA basically usurped and overthrew their government so that the United Fruit Company, an American company, could have access to their land. Therefore, we stole their resources, ripped them of their land, created chaos in the streets, created crime. Now we're mad at them because they run away from the country and try to come here. It's the same thing we do with urban communities. We blame these gang members, which God knows I don't justify or validate anybody committing crime. But have you ever stopped to think why so many people in our communities are in gangs? Have you ever stopped to think why there's so much crime and violence in a community like Inglewood? Because until we do that, we're only going to police by slapping on the hand at the tail end, and we'll never get to the source, we'll never get to the root, and we'll never actually solve the problem.
So what is this root?
I would suggest inequality in America, the crime issue, is directly related to the issue of inequality. Now, I will agree with Reverend Dr. Wallace here on the moral decay of this country in certain ways. We agree very heavily on this. However, I would suggest that when you look at the role that the government can play, the government in this country has exploited workers historically for years. The government in this country has turned a blind eye when capitalists have done all kinds of egregious sins and violations, not paying people, allowing them to die. There's this book called The Jungle by Upton Sinclair that showed in the early 1900s what happened in Chicago meatpacking industry when the government did not regulate them. So what I'm saying is this. Then you look at redlining, and you look at the lack of loans that were given to African-American people and white flight in these communities, and a lack of investment in schools, and the easy access to guns and drugs being dropped into the community, and you have a perfect storm for violence. So it's the same violence, by the way, you would see in, say, Middle East and Palestinian community, where people are disconnected from opportunities and resources. They join gangs, they join terrorist organizations. Our kids do the same things. We got to deal with crime at the source.
I think let me touch on that another part of that source issue. If the source of problems within human nature, on a philosophical perspective, is this environmental atmospheric problem of that creates the situation from which these inequalities stem, such as racism, such as problems with lack of school funding, problems with the environment of food, etc., creates this type of situation. If that's the case, then the environment creates these types of problems. Would you say the same thing then about the creation of George W. Bush, the creation of Dick Cheney, the creation of Marty Madoff? They also had problems, but they come from an environment as well. So we should blame the environment for what's happening, what they've done.
I don't understand.
The political environment from which they've come, the sociological environment from which they grew up, the people they surround themselves with, created that individual. So would you say the same thing about them?
Are you speaking to criminal acts? That
some would talk, yes, some would claim Bush had this.
Are you asking me whether their environment caused their criminality?
Yes.
I would suggest that human nature causes people to oftentimes do things that are immoral. I'm not talking about whether we live in a utopian society where everyone lives in a way where they're not committing crimes. I'm talking about how do we mitigate and how do we lessen the amount of crime and violence that we have. It is very clear to me that every community does not look like Englewood. It's clear to me that every country doesn't look like America. Somebody has figured this out. You know in Japan, that they have a very minimal amount of gun violence in Japan? Are Japanese people more moral than us? Are Japanese people more kind than us? Or maybe, just maybe, that they have a government and a culture that has different values. And I'm suggesting, ladies and gentlemen, you're always going to have people who are doing the wrong thing. But let's make it so that it is harder for the level of violence and the level of inequality that exists in this country. And I'm going to tell you this very clearly. This is not utopian. It's happening all over the world. We just need to wake up and start doing it.
Where do I start?
Well, what I was trying to touch on is the major distinction between the liberal and the conservative viewpoint on some issues. One focuses on the predominance of choice, and the other focuses on the environmental issues. Both of them are important in determining and creating the people that we are. There's just different focus on them in the discussions.
I understand, but one of the things when we talk about crime, and I think we've talked about this before, it just hasn't been brought up here. One of the things that people don't want to talk about is the absence of fathers in the black community. A lot of people go to gangs because there is no male figure to stand up for them when the gangs come around and try to say, hey, you come and join with us and we'll take care of you. I would have never let my sons. They would have had to go through me to get to my. I have two boys. We have two boys. They're in their 30s now. But they would have had to come through me to get to my son. They're not going to touch my sons. They're not joining the gang, and that's the way it is. You have to deal with me. And in some of these communities, we've got a lot of out of wedlock. And I'm not trying to beat up on single parent households. Please understand. I'm a minister of the gospel. I know that there are certain reasons sometimes women have children out of wedlock. Sometimes, they do have a husband, the husband goes off to war and gets killed, or gets killed on the job. But you have to have the male and the female in the home to bring these kids up right. Now, it doesn't mean that they're always going to grow up right. There's a lot of people who have there's two-parent households and are rich kids, and they're so spoiled that they don't know how to behave. But generally speaking, having the man and the woman in the home will help cut out some of that stuff, and then having communities decide that they're not going to allow this crap to happen in their neighborhood, and not being afraid to go ahead and say there's a crack house over there selling crack. We need to get rid of it. And it also includes. I must talk about my comrades in ministry, those pastors who aren't doing. Who aren't doing anything. You come to Sunday and all it is about praise God, and you go out and they're not in the streets. They're not talking to people. They're not trying to really change people's life. It's all about the money. It's all about having your best life now. And we've got
I understand, yeah. The significant issues. Let's talk about the Me Too movement. The APA just released, the American Psychological Association, and the DSM manual about toxic masculinity. Masculinity in general, specifically traditional masculinity, being dangerous for boys. Many have taken this to storm. I've taken a storm on this issue and caused that many political as well as sociological issues are going to come forth from that. Let's talk about the Me Too issue and the masculinity. Let's touch on that.
If you just give me just 30 seconds. I just want to respond to the issue of the caller. I think it ties in masculinity. I agree with him fully on the idea of, I have a son, I have two daughters, and what has happened, African Americans, 70% of our kids grew up without a father in the home. But without looking at public policy, we don't know why. It's just that people of color don't like to stay together. It's that people of color are sexually irresponsible. If we don't have a understanding of public policy, then we assume those things. Literally, slavery and Jim Crow segregation have had a deleterious impact on the African American family.
No.
Actually, it has.
It has not.
It has.
It has not.
Now I know where you're going with this, Dr. Wallace. You're going to say that during slavery that we had more firmer family structure. In the early 1900s, we had firmer family structure. You are correct. However,
Up to 1940. It wasn't until the 1960s.
Okay, absolutely. However, living under the threat of domestic terrorism, you're telling me for hundreds of years has no impact on the black family? You're suggesting to me that the roles in the females and males have not been impacted significantly by the hatred that this country has consistently put African Americans through?
You paint with so broad a brush, my brother.
Well, I'm telling you,
I'm sure there's some families that it devastated, but there are other families. We even started cities and towns and villages of our own.
And I agree with that, but how are you going to tell me?
Going back to the
No, but let me finish my public policy point. But how are you going to tell me that when my wife can be sold, I can have a stable family?
They went and they found their spouses after slavery. You have countless stories of people. I just finished reading, and I can't remember the name of the woman. I just finished reading the story. Go back and read some of the slave stories. After slavery was over, they went back and they found their children. They found their spouses.
So we'll move on.
Yeah, we need to move on. In the interest of time.
Let me just say this quickly. I'll say this in 30 seconds. I promise. No fault divorce laws, war on drugs, mass incarceration, etc. Those also had an impact on the African American family in the last 50 years, and those things that we have to look at.
Okay. Now let's talk about the Me Too movement just for a little bit. Many women have been coming forward. Politicians have fallen. Ministers have fallen. TV personalities have fallen. TV shows have removed major characters that can impact the entire season. Millions of dollars can be impacted by the acts of certain individuals who are in power. Certain women, out of their own bravery, even to the cost of much, have stepped up and spoke up, which called it the Me Too. It happened to Me Too. The problem is, how do you regulate that, right? Anybody who touches you the wrong way is equivalent to another person who rapes you. How do you, what's the regulation? Are you guilty till proven innocent? Do we believe the woman first? Any thoughts on this issue as you...
As I said in my statement, we still have to uphold the law. Now, if we need to make some changes to the law, we need to make changes to the law. But we need to look at it based on trying to say that the person is innocent until proven guilty. But we may, with our society, some of our mores which have changed and allowing men and women to be more sexually active and so forth. It is hard. I'm glad I'm not dating these days and growing up. I'm worried about my kids who are in their 30s, trying to figure out what's okay and what's not okay. I mean, because things have changed over you let me know about that or not. Ladies, if you like somebody, then they can come up and talk to you and sit next to you and touch you. But if you don't like them, all of a sudden, leave me alone. Oh, excuse me. Back in my day, I'm not saying sexually touching. I'm talking about touching somebody's butt. Joe Biden.
You said Joe Biden.
I'll say this very quickly. You know what, ladies and gentlemen, I suppose it's supposed to be too moving. If the pendulum swings slightly further to the other side for a period of time, I mean, so what? The fact of the matter is that for hundreds of years it swung the other side, and I think that people deserve an opportunity to lay out their grievances in a culture that has always ignored those grievances. I am less worried about what happens to men. And don't get me wrong, obviously I'm a man. There is an idea that I don't want to be falsely accused, but I think it's laughable to me that the second that someone talks about the Me Too movement, the second someone talks about affirmative action, the second someone talks about reparations, people all talk about, oh my gosh, the person in power, they might be a victim too, and what's going to happen? I mean, doggone it, what's going to happen to them after literally for 250 years, other people have been a victim. For 400 years, other people have been a victim. if there are a few minor casualties of war, I'm not necessarily being cavalier about that, but come on, our biggest problem in the Me Too movement is not men who are falsely accused. Our biggest problem in the Me Too movement is still that women have still not come up because they're still afraid to be in an environment where they actually feel like they can voice their opinion and not be judged and criticized for it.
Let's talk about the economy a little bit. I just in the interest that we have to, I want to cover some of this. You have some Q&A time as well. Okay, so the economy. The general conservative position is to go from the top down. Trickle down economics, we're going to there's another position. It's go from the bottom up. To help from the people from the ground up. So, is there a middle ground on this? How do we deal with the economy, liberal or conservative? What's the good thoughts on that?
First of all, you have to understand how, a lot of folks don't understand how the free market actually works. It's not supposed to be, because some of what you talked about with some of the egregious things that have been done in capitalism, it's not free market. There's crony capitalism where the industry and government end up hooking up together, and the big wigs actually end up getting all the nice deals and everything else. We talk about competition and how competition keeps prices low and wages low, and allows people to get an entry level into the workforce, like minimum wage. I was talking about minimum wage. When you set a minimum wage, like I said, everybody's trying to do $15 an hour. I don't know what's so special about $15 an hour, but everyone wants to do $15 an hour.
It's more than 7.
Why don't we do $20 an hour or $100 an hour? Because some people can't afford it. You can't force this on mom and pop shops. Most people are hired more by mom and pop shops and small businesses than they are by the big companies. And the big companies can absorb that. Walmart can absorb $15 an hour. The little mom and pop shop cannot absorb that. So I mean, and so it starts saying that you cannot, as I said, you can't negotiate your prices or your salary. And what happened with Walter Williams says, in Race and Economics, how much can we blame on discrimination? He argues that in the 1940s, the unemployment rate for blacks and whites was around the same for young people. Because in effect, the minimum wage was archaic. It was so low that they were already paying people more than what the minimum wage was. So a black kid can come in and say, hey, I'm willing to work for you at such and such a wage, while the white kid may come in and say, you know, I gotta have $2 an hour. The black kid can come and say, you know what, get my foot in the door, I'll work for $1.90. That's self-interest. The guy who owns the business is interested in saving money. So he'll hire the black kid to come in and work. And if he's doing a good job, eventually he gets a raise and he moves on up the ladder. What we're doing is we're keeping people from young kids, because young kids aren't going to get $15 an hour out of high school. We're keeping them from getting involved in the job market.
So the argument here that I firmly disagree with is basically a race to the bottom. And we should let companies do whatever they want to.
No, it's not a race to the bottom.
You're saying that I should come in, you give $5, I say, hey, I'll work for $2. Okay,
I just gave you an example of what the minimum wage was already in effect. They weren't paying people minimum wage.
Do you know what the minimum wage is right now? It's $7.25 an hour. Do you know if you work 40 hours a week for a whole year, how much you'll make at the end of the year? $15,000 a year. What are you going to do with $15,000 a year, folks?
Nobody said that you were supposed to live $15.
This is the federal minimum wage. This is what the government has said is the bottom that people can pay you. What I'm saying,
and generally, that's for young people coming into the workforce.
So you mean to tell me the only people working minimum wage are young people who are at home with their families?
Yes,
their parents?
exactly.
Okay, we have this.
But that's okay.
Well, that's why we have college, right?
It's exploitation. Companies will exploit you as much as they can. They will do whatever they get away with. If the government does not regulate them, if I own a company, I will pay you whatever you're going to wait for the kindness of my heart to give you a good wage? That's ludicrous if you think about it.
Okay, we haven't touched Black Lives Matter yet. Both of you made some significant points on that. But in the interest of time, we have delegated a specific period for the audience for our questions and answers. So, if you have a question, if you have something you're thinking about, something you're dying to ask, please put your hand up. I'll make my way around. And please, when I give you the microphone, or I will put the microphone to you, ask the question. Don't give us a commentary. Hopefully that works. as we do that. And focus your question as you do it. Okay, who's our first? In the back? Okay, coming up.
I'm Gilbert. For Dr. Wallace, I just want to ask you one question. Do you think it should be more easy for an 18-year-old to have access to a gun than the access he can have to a bottle of beer? Do you think an 18-year-old should have easy access to a gun better than he can have an access to a bottle of beer or alcohol outside? Two, criminals don't make guns, do they? Guns come from somewhere. Criminals don't make guns. And the next one is that if there's a proper gun control, we will not have issues with thinking about many are going to walk down here with the gun, because we know that there's actual control that you cannot have access to it.
Let's try a little bit too long.
Now, Dr. Ted, it was Buddha's quote that says that we are shaped by our own thoughts. We become what we think. So the question straight to you is that what role does a community, immediate community, have to do with the shootings going on in our own black community? What you didn't touch about that, you were concentrating on the government side only. I just want to hear from you. And
I'm sorry, I'm just time. All right, Joe.
That's a good question. At what age do you limit guns? I know people out in the on farms and things like that. Back in the day, they had guns and would shoot guns. They teach their kids how to shoot guns. I think that's something that each state. Well, I'd rather have that talked about with each state as opposed to the federal government trying to determine at what age. I mean, it's a good question. We decide what age a person should can drive and have a license. We decide what age people can get married, things like that. And I'm not saying arbitrarily anybody, you give a 3-year-old a gun. I mean, no. But, there are things that we need to consider at what age can a person, actually purchase a gun. What was the other question?
And I would say very clearly, I advocated for a holistic approach to violence. I focus on the government conversation to distinguish between the conservative ideology, liberal ideology. But let me say this very clearly. There is no entity in this nation that can move as quickly with the amount of resources at its disposal than the government. And what I'm suggesting is that the government got us into a lot of this mess. It has some role or responsibility to do that. Communities do matter as well. But the fact of the matter is that we could all say, I could tell you all right now, hey everybody, let's go home and love our families and be nice to the people on our block, and I'm going to be a community leader and tell you those things, which I think are very important. But if you walk out of here and you have easy access to guns, and the government doesn't do anything about that, and do anything about the unemployment issues in your community, that sort of thing, then my words will not have as much power as it could.
Thank you, gentlemen. We have another question.
Okay. Hi, my name is Kiana Khalid, and this is really one for Dr. Wallace. I have a few. So 20 years ago, Australia had its worst mass shooting ever. In 1996, they passed a law to ban the sale of firearms in their country. And during that time, they've only had one mass shooting. In the United States, we've had over 307 mass shootings since then. So my question for you is, how can you say that not banning the sale of firearms is not a solution? Because clearly it is shown to be effective in one country. And also to the point you made a little bit earlier, it was about a car. It was more of a metaphor. And you said, we don't blame the car for killing the person, we blame the driver. But we do modify the car to stop it from hitting another person. We add sensors and we add motion detectors. So why shouldn't we add those extra measures as well? Like, why shouldn't we ban the sale of firearms if it is shown to be effective?
Because first of all, we have a Second Amendment that says we're allowed to have Secondly, we shouldn't ban guns from people who lawfully hold their gun and don't go around shooting other people. It's only a small segment of our society that actually does that.
So about the point where you said that people lawfully buy guns, in the past 19 mass shootings, the majority of guns that were used were bought legally. So how can you really say that the guns that are used, that criminals are going to get guns illegally, and they can also get it legally?
They can get them legal.
I have another question over there.
Hello, my name is Alice. I have pretty much a statement for Professor Williams. I wrote that gun control laws stop good guys from protecting themselves and others. The locations that have signs posted saying no guns allowed are places that give bad guys a welcome sign. It expresses the fact that people won't be able to protect themselves and others because they are the good guys. Like the example you used as far as the massacre when it was over 400 people. Some people that have guns are military trained, myself. And that could be effective in those situations other than waiting for police to get there and however long that's going to take. Making laws stricter on the good guys does not fix the problem. The problem
Just trying to limit the questions, but
okay, the problem is the law welcomes bad guys to specific areas where they know people are unarmed. The law makes it easier for bad guys, but the focus is on controlling guns. They contradict the laws when it comes to good guys like protect yourself, but not here because we don't allow guns in here.
Cool. Couple things. First of all, when the Second Amendment was written, you couldn't carry a weapon into a federal building. There was gun control literally the day the Second Amendment was written. Because they realized that even though we're giving people this right, we don't want everyone to carry it into anywhere. So that's always existed, number one. Number two, I reject the binary choice of good guys and bad guys. I think the idea of looking and saying, oh, well, this is a good guy, that's a bad guy, here's a good guy, here's a bad guy. What happens when a good guy becomes a bad guy? What happens when a bad guy becomes a good guy? Human nature is much more complicated than that. And so, to me, that is a very scary concept. I mean, the idea, listen, I've never committed a crime other than traffic violations. But who's to say that given the right set of circumstances, I couldn't kill somebody if I had a gun in my hand? I mean, of course I could. And so, once again, this idea that there are only good people and only bad people, I think is crazy, particularly when you look at how much guns are used in domestic violence situations, and how much guns are used at home to kill people, and how much guns are used at home to kill yourself. 19,000 suicides by hand. No one's talking about that because people don't care. You know why they don't care? Because we're so married to this idea that everybody should have a gun. Oh, well, we lose 19,000 people a year. Oh, they shouldn't have killed themselves. Or maybe, if they never gun, they would have killed themselves with something else. Maybe they would have hung themselves, or stabbed themselves, or run themselves over with their car, because, cars kill people too. I mean, if you think about it, it's illogical.
Thank you,
There should not
Professor
actually be
Williams.
guns
Thank you.
in this society.
Okay.
Hello, my name is Isaiah Muhammad, and this question goes out to both. So, right after high school, when you are 18, you actually, right after high school, you can go out and you can just go out to war. You're trained to use a gun, shoot out and fight for this country. Yet at the exact same time, you would have to be at an age of 21 or 22, and I won't remember 23, to go out to certain establishments to drink or, to drink and to enjoy the time. So you are trusted to go out and train to shoot with a gun, but you're not trusted to drink. You're not trusted to go to certain establishments. So do you think that do you think they should actually change ages or reduce or increase the ages to make things more fair?
No, and let me also say this. I'm going to leave it there. No.
No to what? I'm not sure what the no is to.
The question
was, we changed the laws to make it so that people who are younger, who can buy a beer, should have easier access to guns. And I'm going to say very clearly no. Oh, here's what I was going to say. I actually agree with the gun rights advocates slightly. And here's why. I think gun laws don't work the way they are. And you know why? Because we're half doing the job. We're saying, oh, we had mass murder, so let's ban this one type of gun. Oh, let's ban guns in Chicago, but leave them available in Indiana. Either we're going to ban them or we're not. And my argument is to go all the way.
Wallace. I totally agree with the Second Amendment. Everyone should protect their families. But what I don't agree with is being able to purchase a gun that is really used for the army, not for households, such as machine weapons. Why do you think it's reasonable to think that you should be able to purchase weapons that's specifically made for war activities? Is it for to shoot to kill, or is it to protect yourself?
Well, first of all, machine guns are illegal anyway. They don't sell machine guns, they sell semi-automatics. And semi-automatics, you know, a lot of people use them for hunting, for sport. And you really don't have that many, you know, you have the mass shootings, but you really don't have that many other folks who are carrying these guns, you know, walking around with these guns. They use them for target practice and what have you. And if people are lawfully using their weapons, I don't see why you would have to have a law to say that they can't have them. Now we're trying to do something with magazines, and you can't have 15 clips or 20 clips. You can only have 5 clips. Some of it gets kind of ridiculous, because if you're actually trying to stop people from committing murders, the criminal's not going to go and buy a 5-clip, you know, thing. They're going to go out and get the illegal clip and then put it in, because criminals are by definition don't follow the law. So you're not really going to stop. The only way to stop these kinds of things is to have somebody else there to shoot them. Now let me also say this. For you women who are clapping, the #1 equalizer for you if somebody tries to come up and rape you is to pull out a gun. Because it doesn't matter how big he is, he can't stop him. He's not faster than a speeding bullet. So you need to understand that, you know, for women's rights to be able to take care of themselves.
Thank you, Dr. Wallace. Thank you. We got another question here.
Hi, my name is Katrina Malone. My question is actually a bit off topic. I'm changing the topic. Sorry, guys. So it's quite simple. I see we're on the fence with kind of society versus human nature. So my question is just a bit. It's simple. So either or. One of you may choose neither. You know. Is it environmental determinism or environmental possibilism? If you see what I'm saying, one or other. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I would just say the question about human nature, and again, talking about psychological concepts of behavior, nature versus nurture. Why do people do what they do? Human nature is very complex and complicated. And I think for us to, in any way, try to simplify, I think would do us a disservice. I think it's both and. I think some people are born in a way they have stronger proclivities for certain activities, and certain people are born in situations where their environment creates that. What I'm suggesting is because all of those exist, for me again, back to the gun issue, let's make it more difficult for them to take someone else's life.
I say I have to go to the Bible now. All have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. It says that we are all born sinners. And so there's a defect within us that needs to be addressed. And you can either say, because of that defect, you need to get rid of all the guns, if you could, or that defect says you need to have your own gun to be able to protect yourself, not only from people, your neighbors, or somebody who wants to do harm to you, whether it's the KKK or anybody else, or whether it's the government itself. I mean, the more power you give to the government, the more they're able to determine what you can and cannot do. What do you think Jim Crow laws were about? Where do you think they came from? They didn't just spring out of nowhere. The government came up with the idea of Jim Crow.
Thank you, gentlemen. Another question? My name is Ismael, and you stated multiple times that criminal is someone who doesn't follow the law. So when do you consider somebody a criminal? Before or after they commit the crime? Because other school shootings, the mass shootings, were someone who's done with mental illness. Now, they haven't been committed as a criminal before. So when do you draw the line when somebody's a criminal before they're able to actually acquire a gun?
Is that for me?
Yes, sir.
It's once you decide you're going to go shoot somebody that you shouldn't be shooting. So once you decide you're going to go So you're not gonna follow that law. You're not gonna go out and say, okay, I can't go into that building because it's got the little sticker on it that says no guns allowed. Really? I'd rather see let me ask you this. If you were to go into thinking about going into somebody's backyard, would you go into the yard that says beware of dog, or you go to the one that says, no animals on this property? You stay away from the one that says beware of dog. So it would be better to have on your sign, we carry guns, as opposed to saying, no guns allowed. Because then the person knows, the perp knows, there aren't any guns in this place. I can go in there and do what I want to do.
We have a question.
Good afternoon. My name is Aziz, and I have two questions for you guys. First off, I appreciate you guys coming here and sharing your ideas. So in 1857, I know Abraham Lincoln said that it was morally right in the best interest of America that black Americans and white Americans be separated. And also Thomas Jefferson wanted to establish black people in a separate land of our own and give us aid and supply us for a certain time period. Do you guys feel like it's necessary, or that black Americans in 2019 should have ability to establish our own land, our own territory, whether in America or elsewhere? Because I know, like Israel at first, the Zionists, they wanted Uganda at first before they was in Palestine. And so, do you feel like here in 2019 that black Americans should be granted our own separate territory?
That's a very good question. If you had asked me that a year ago, I would have said no. If you ask me that today, which you are, I would say that I really have to think about it, and here's why. Native Americans probably are the only group in America I would suggest that suffered worse than African Americans. Native Americans, African Americans were enslaved, Native Americans were exterminated. But the U.S. government created over 100 treaties with sovereign Native American lands and gave them territory throughout the United States in which they have their own control over their governing affairs, that sort of thing, and gave them a revenue source through the casinos currently. I look at that and realize that for them, the only solution was to have sovereignty and separation for their own viability. Do I think it's feasible among African Americans today? I don't know that it is. But I do think we should be talking about this because to try, the wealth gap between black and white Americans is so high that it would take us 228 years to catch up. And so sovereignty sounds radical, but America's got to do something about this inequality. And maybe as we talk about reparations, maybe the conversation needs not just to be about checks, but maybe it needs to be exactly what you're talking about.
I would say no. For what purpose are we trying to be separate? We have certain towns where we're like 90-something%. I look at Fort Heights. Fort Heights is destitute. Okay. And I wouldn't say it's destitute because of racism. It's destitute because there have been very bad policies put in Fort Heights. And the last mayor that they had stole $147,000. So what is it about black people coming together and having our own country that's going to make sure that we do the right thing by not only our own people, but also economically to build up? Someone's already said, I think, that we take the economic viability of black people in this nation, in this country, we're
Like the top 10 in the world.
Top 10 in the world. So I'm not sure what that does for us, and the whole idea about who's going to give up their land for us to start our own country or whatever. Who's going to do that? It's the whole idea about reparations. It made sense to have reparations for those who, when we first got out of slavery, the 40 acres and a mule was a great idea. Unfortunately, Abraham Lincoln got shot. And the person who took over basically was a Democrat, and a Democrat who was sympathetic to the South, and so he undid the 40 acres. But now we're so far removed from slavery. And all the people that we would have wanted to have gotten money and land from are now dead. And the slaves who deserved that money are dead. So who are you going to get it from? You're going to get it from Britain? who helped push the slave trade on America? You're going to get it from the African nations who sold black Africans into slavery? Who are you going to get it from?
If I can respond, it's a very important conversation you're bringing up because reparation is a good conversation. I would say that we're not that far removed from slavery. I would suggest that even given the idea that the Voting Rights Act just happened in the 1960s, that truly African Americans have only been citizens with protected rights in this country for about 50 years. And given that, how there was no ability to build wealth, there was no ability to vote, there was no ability to have access to credit. I mean, how could you?
Ability to vote. There wasn't any ability to vote in the South. Now,
so in half the country, there was no ability to vote. That's okay.
Gentlemen, I have another question
I'm
here.
not saying it's okay. I'm just making general statements about.
So if half the country cannot vote, there's no ability to vote. That's what I'm saying.
No, there is ability to vote. There was people voting. Actually,
Gentlemen, thank you. We have another question.
My name is Gary. I guess my question is more of like a conspiracy theory, but do you believe that the government allows weapons to prevent overpopulation in America?
No, I don't. I don't, because the weapons are used correctly, the way they're supposed to be used. We won't be running around with issues. Well, what do you want the government to do? You want the government to come into your house and take weapons? You want to be like Nazi Germany? Is that what you want? I don't think we want that. I think, let me give you this quote. Because I haven't been able to deal with this whole thing about equality either. But one thing that Milton Friedman says, he says, society that puts equality in the sense of equality of outcome ahead of freedom will end up with neither equality nor freedom. The use of force to achieve equality will destroy freedom, and the force introduced for good purposes will end up in the hands of people who use it to promote their own interests. The more power you give the government, the more they're able to do whatever the heck they want, and you can't get it back. It's hard to get it back. We wanted freedom. We wanted the ability to be free. I'm not interested in being shackled by the government.
Thank you. Okay, we have a question on top. Then.
Good evening. My name is Robin Underwood, and my question is for Professor Tia Williams. First, I want to talk briefly about ratifying the Second Amendment, and my question for you is if you think that ratifying the amendment will allow for other amendments to be changed in which our country solely functions on, and then you compare our country to Japan, in which those countries have harsher crimes, and I just Googled, just researched because you just engaged me, it's 154 inmates in their prison that are waiting to be executed right now. They have laws, stricter laws than USA that prevents individuals for acting with gun laws that I feel that our two countries couldn't be compared.
Well, I thank you for the question. I appreciate the question. I think we have to compare them, and here's why. The amount of gun murders in America is 5 times higher than that in Japan. And you can't have access to weapons in Japan the way you can in the United States.
So how much bigger are we?
It doesn't, if this is per capita, this is not an aggregate thing I'm talking about. I'm literally talking about you cannot own a gun in this country, there are no gun murders. It's not rocket science. And so we wonder why we have so much gun death. You look at this issue. Now, I wanted to answer the second part. I'm sorry, the first part of your question.
Second Amendment?
The Second Amendment. So you're worried about if you begin to mess with the Second Amendment, what about the other amendment? Yeah, I think we need to change some other amendments too. Like, I think we should change the 13th Amendment that says that slavery is still legal if you're in jail. I think we should change that too. And maybe we should change the Second Amendment as well. I got no problem changing the Constitution.
We have time for just a couple more questions. We're running out of time.
Hi, my name is Jeremiah. I have a question for you, Professor Wallace, and also you can answer this too if you want. So I understand that your Republican views, but with the Republicans being traditionalists as far as America, how do you feel that African Americans fit into the scheme of being true Americans from a Republican standpoint? Because I don't feel like it was never meant for us, because it wasn't.
I'm sorry?
I mean, the American lifestyle never was designed for Africans or African Americans. It was designed for, those who came over and conquered and colonized. So my question is, how do you feel like we fit in that? Like, you being an African American Republican, right? Yeah. How does that work?
Well, actually, I want to amend that. I'm actually an African American conservative. and I reject his understanding of conservatism. We're not trying to keep things the same or go back to some antiquated way of living. Actually, the name conservative, we were originally called classical liberals because we believe in liberty. Even believe in people to be able to live their lives as they want to live it. And if you go even further, there's another group called libertarians that even think about more liberty than even we do as conservatives. Individual liberty and fidelity, strong family values and economic empowerment. We believe that everybody has an opportunity to all of these things. You can be the Huxtables, and I guess I shouldn't use that because you can be middle class, you can be upper middle class. I mean, we've made it. This whole thing about equality to me, I want to say chill. To me, this whole thing about equality, we have equality under the law, okay? We have equality because we're made in the image of God, I believe. Any other kind of equality is nonsensical because it can't be done. People who live in the mountains have different, well, let me put it this way. Somebody who lives in Alaska will probably never be somebody who runs track and field because they don't have track and field out in Alaska, right? So because of where they live, because of their environment, so environment is important in some of these things. We have, you know why black athletes do well, African athletes in the long distance, because they have places.
I think we're wrapping up. I just want to say one thing about the libertarian.
Wrap it up, yeah.
The libertarian position is irresponsible. The extreme conservatism is irresponsible. True conservatives were against the civil rights movement because they said that the government had no role in protecting people's rights. That wasn't their job. That's scary.
That's not.
Okay, we have a final or penalty for the question.
I read
my
his
final
book.
question, I'm Chelsea.
I haven't seen it like that.
I'm an alumni here, Panther Pride. My final question is, I need to hear a solution plan as far as because I hear the opinions of gun violence from both of you. What is your solution that you believe, as far as from the ground up, what can people contribute as far as the common worker that does not deserve $15 an hour, and poor mom and pop can step on those $15 an hour people, but besides all of that, what is the solution that will move our community forward?
Solution, as far as I'm concerned, when it comes to the economy, is increase your skill sets. Like you guys are doing here. You're going to school. You're increasing your human capital. You're increasing your human capital. And you have to do it, but you have to do it also in areas in which people are hiring. You can't just, we can't go around saying, well, okay, I'm going to get a degree in English and nobody's hiring teachers, nobody's hiring people for English. So we need to be aware of what's happening out in the market. We need to, get ourselves prepared to go out into the market and know what's going on. We also need to be able to network with other people. A lot of times people get hired because somebody else is there that knows them. But what I was trying to say about equality, can I say real quick, is that nobody has the exact skills. I think it's ludicrous when LeBron James runs around with sneakers that says equality on it. Nobody's equal to LeBron James. And nobody's going to get paid the same way he does. There are different pay scales based on how well you perform. Michael Jordan was the first one to get $30 million a year. And that was back in the 90s. People are now just getting $30 million for playing. Because he wasn't equal to anybody else. Nobody's equal. Nobody has the skill set you have, brother. Nobody has the skill set you have. And people will decide how much they're willing to pay for your skill sets, or you go into business for yourself.
The last thing I'll say in response to her. If we don't deal with the inequality issue in this country, and we continue to become a country of haves and have-nots, the have-nots will begin to take from the haves. And that is a country you don't want to live in.
Gentlemen, ladies, thank you for participating. A round of applause for our gentlemen. Thank you for being with us for the Socratic project. There are some refreshments, pizza, and otherwise in the faculty lounge to the right.